My grandfather's name was Hu Quoc. The ancestors of the Hu family were famous landlords in the region, and at their most glorious, they owned more than 40 adjoining houses across 3 alleys in the town. Some family members were officials, others were merchants, and they even donated money to support transport work and supply grain to the Manchu court. There's a saying, no one stays rich for 3 generations, no one stays poor for 3 generations, and it truly holds. Even with mountains of gold and silver, a family cannot endure if there are prodigal sons who only know how to squander and destroy. By the years of the Dan Quoc era, the Hu family's fortunes had declined by the time it reached my grandfather's generation. First, the family property was divided, and his share was not small, enough for him to live comfortably his whole life. However, he refused to learn good things, which of course was also influenced by the social circumstances of the time. First, he was addicted to gambling, and later he became addicted to fuck tho cow, eventually squandering his entire inheritance. In his youth, he smoked and partied, committing every vice. In the end, he was so desperate he didn't have a single cent. Once addicted, people's guts twist and turn, how can they endure it? But without money, who would let him smoke? Previously, when he had money and possessions, from the owner to the servants in the opium den, they would fawn over him, calling him Master Ho, and treating him with great care. But when he had no money, they treated him like a beggar, cursing, scolding, beating, and chasing him away as if he were an outcast. When people are utterly destitute, what good are a few notions of morality and shame? My grandfather came up with a plan to swindle money from his uncle. His uncle knew he was an addicted prodigal son and usually wouldn't give him a single cent, but this time, he deceived his uncle, claiming he was about to get married and asked for some money. Hearing this, his uncle was so moved that tears welled up. This unfilial nephew was finally doing something decent. If he could find a virtuous niece-in-law to look after him carefully and guide him, he might even improve later. So his uncle gave my grandfather 20 Dai Duang coins, admonishing him to live properly after marrying and to avoid fuck tho cow. He said that in a few days, when he was free, he would personally come to see his new niece-in-law. My grandfather, Hu Quoc, had many cunning tricks. To deal with his uncle, after returning home, he immediately went into the village to find a craftsman specializing in making paper effigies of people and horses, the kind burned for the dead. This old craftsman was very skilled. He could reproduce anything that could be described. At my grandfather's request, the paper effigy maker created a paper girl, pasted with glue. Then he used watercolors to paint her eyebrows, eyes, nose, clothes, and hair. From a distance, alas, she looked exactly like a real person. My grandfather carried the paper effigy home, placed it in the inner bed, and covered it with a blanket. He felt very relieved, thinking that when his uncle arrived in a few days, he would simply make the excuse that his wife was ill and bedridden, unable to receive guests, and his uncle could just look from a distance. Pleased with his plan, he unconsciously hummed a few tunes, then slipped into town to smoke. A few days later, his uncle indeed arrived, even bringing fabric and pastries to visit his niece-in-law. My grandfather, using his pre-planned excuses, reluctantly declined, complaining that his wife was unwell and couldn't receive guests. He then lifted the curtain for his uncle to look from outside, and immediately dropped it again. His uncle was displeased and muttered, "Is this brat trying to fool me again? No. Today I must see my niece-in-law. If she's sick, I'll pay for a physician to treat her." My grandfather desperately held his uncle back, refusing to let him in. But the more he resisted, the more suspicious his uncle became. They pulled and tugged, and in the end my grandfather couldn't stop him. His uncle burst into the inner room, and upon looking at the bed, he almost died of fright. A pale woman's face, with round red patches on her cheeks, eyes wide open, staring straight at the ceiling. Clearly a paper effigy. Many things happened that spring. Hu Quoc's scheme of buying a paper effigy to swindle money was exposed. His uncle, enraged, fell ill and couldn't get up, and within 3 days he passed away. Relatives and friends of the Hu family all avoided my grandfather like a thief, refusing to lend him money, not even giving him a scrap of leftover food. He was forced to sell his pair of rosewood cabinets for 2 silver coins. These cabinets were his grandmother's dowry, which he had intended to keep as a remembrance and hadn't dared to pawn. But when his addiction flared up, such thoughts no longer mattered. Taking the 2 silver coins, he bought a small amount of fuck tho cow, rushed home, and immediately lunged onto the bed to light a pipe and take 2 strong drags. His body suddenly felt light, as if he were floating on clouds. At that moment he felt ecstatic, like an immortal. All the trivial matters of being scorned, harassed, scolded, and cursed daily seemed insignificant. After taking 2 more drags, he suddenly noticed a dark, shaggy heap on his tattered bed. Looking closer, he saw a huge sewer rat crouching in the corner of the bed. This rat seemed to have lived a long time. Its whiskers were all white, and its body was almost the size of a cat. It was lying there, inhaling the smoke rising from Ho Quoc Hoa's pipe, apparently also aware of the benefits of opium, snorting greedily as it enjoyed it. My grandfather suddenly found this very interesting. He turned to the rat and said, "You're addicted to this too? Looks like we're fellow devotees." After saying that, he took another puff and blew the thick, pungent smoke towards the rat. The rat seemed to know my grandfather had no ill intentions and wasn't afraid of him, so it craned its neck to receive the dense smoke blowing onto it. By early afternoon, seemingly satisfied with its craving, the rat slowly crawled away. For several days, it was like this. Every day, the rat would crawl over to smoke with my grandfather. My grandfather was scorned everywhere he went, with no one to confide in. Seeing the rat keep him company like this, he became quite fond of it. Once, when the rat arrived a bit late, he even tried to suppress his craving and waited for it. However, the joy was short-lived. My grandfather's house now consisted only of a bare bed and 4 walls. He had no money left to buy more opium. Depressed and out of options, he lamented to the rat, "Oh rat, today is the end of the line. I have no money left to buy fuck tho cow. I'm afraid we won't get to smell that pungent aroma together anymore." After saying this, he kept sniffling incessantly. The rat heard his words, its 2 eyes blinking brightly as if contemplating something, then it suddenly turned and left. When night fell, it returned, carrying a silver coin in its mouth, and placed it beside my grandfather's pillow. My grandfather was both overjoyed and astonished. He immediately ran into town all night to buy a piece of fuck tho cow. Back home, he lit it by the lamp, and together with the rat, they smoked to their heart's content, feeling utterly blissful. The next day, the rat returned, carrying 3 silver coins. My grandfather was overjoyed beyond words. Recalling a historical anecdote he had learned in his private school days, he said to the rat, "The one who truly understood Guanzhang was Bao Shuya. Now you know my poverty and treat me so generously. You are truly my soulmate. If you don't disdain me, let us become sworn brothers." From then on, he and the rat called each other brother, referring to the rat as brother rat. They shared food, shared their smoke, and he even made a cotton nest for the rat so it could sleep on the bed with him. Man and rat relied on each other like 2 kindred spirits. Every day, the rat would bring back silver coins, sometimes 1 or 2, sometimes 4 or 5. From then on, my grandfather no longer worried about food and clothing. Many years later, whenever my grandfather recalled those days, he would still say they were the happiest time of his life. Half a year passed and my grandfather grew wealthier, but ironically, isn't there a saying, when rich and prosperous, you meet golden friends, when down and out, you only meet petty people? One can only blame my grandfather Ho Quoc Hoa's fate, his karma, for being eyed by a scoundrel. In the village lived a ruffian named Wang Nhi. This fellow couldn't compare to my grandfather. My grandfather, at least, had once been wealthy, having been Master Ho for nearly 2 decades. But that Wang Nhi had no such fortune. His family, for 8 generations including himself, had never worn a single pair of intact trousers. When Wang Nhi saw my grandfather's family fortunes decline, he rejoiced at his neighbor's misfortune, and occasionally, for no reason, he would harass and humiliate my grandfather, bullying the former Master Ho several times to satisfy himself. Recently, Wang Nhi found it strange. My grandfather was a poor man with no job, all his possessions had been pawned, and even most of his relatives had passed away. Yet, for some reason, he still managed to smoke as usual. Where did the money for the opium come from? He thought to himself, perhaps he's stealing. I'll stake him out and see. When he steals from someone's house, I'll catch him red-handed and report him to the authorities. Earning a few Dai Duang coins as a reward would be good. However, after staking him out for a while, he discovered that, apart from occasionally going into town to buy food and opium, my grandfather essentially never stepped out of his house and didn't interact with anyone. The more curious Wang Nhi became about where the money came from, the more restless he felt. One day, taking advantage of my grandfather being out to buy things, Wang Nhi seized the opportunity to climb over the wall and jump into the house. He rummaged everywhere, under tables and in cupboards, trying to uncover my grandfather's secret. Suddenly, he saw a large, shaggy rat sleeping on the bed. He casually grabbed it and threw it into the pot of boiling water on the stove, then covered it, thinking that when Ho returned home to drink water, he would hide outside and watch the amusing show. Before Wang Nhi could run out, my grandfather returned home, cornering him inside. As soon as he saw the rat boiled in the pot of water, his eyes immediately turned bloodshot. He grabbed a vegetable knife and hacked at that ruffian Wang more than a dozen times. Fortunately, my grandfather was an addict, and his limbs were weak, so although Wang Nhi was struck by several knife blows, none of the wounds were fatal. Wang Nhi, covered in blood, fled desperately to the security team for help. The captain of the security team was related to a local warlord, and was currently having drinks with him. Upon hearing the news, the captain flew into a rage. How dare someone commit assault and murder in broad daylight, showing no regard for the law? He immediately ordered his subordinates to arrest and bind my grandfather and bring him back. My grandfather was brought back to the station. The captain roared, demanding to know why he had assaulted Wang Nhi with a knife, intending to kill him. My grandfather's eyes welled up with tears, and he sobbed as he recounted the entire story. Finally, he spoke with a voice full of sorrow and resentment. I remember when I was wretched and destitute. Without Brother Rat, I wouldn't have lived to this day. Who knew that a small oversight would cost him his life? Although I didn't kill him, Brother Rat died because of me. If I betray this noble friend in the underworld, where would my loyalty be? I alone am responsible for what I did. I already hacked that scoundrel Wang Nhi. Now, if you want to punish or kill me, I await your judgment, Your Excellency. I only ask that you allow me to go home and bury Brother Rat, and then I can die with my eyes closed. Before the captain could say anything, the warlord beside him was deeply moved and exclaimed to my grandfather, "Damn it! Not forgetting kindness is humanity, not betraying trust is righteousness. If you show such loyalty to a rat, how much more so to a person? I admire your humanity and righteousness. Now, without a place to stay, come with me from now on and serve as my adjutant in the army." Guns were the government. In times of chaos, the words of those who held military power were the law. The warlord ordered his subordinates to whip Wang Nhi to a pulp to appease my grandfather's anger, and then allowed him to go home and bury the rat. My grandfather returned, took a wooden box to cremate his rat friend's body, then dug a hole and buried it. He wept mournfully for a long time before finally leaving to follow the warlord. The proverb truly speaks well. When hungry, even taro tastes good. When full, even rich food is bland. When a person is poor and desperate, even if someone only gives him a bowl of porridge or a piece of rice, he will be immensely grateful. How much more so for the rat that brought my grandfather so much money? Of course, that money was stolen, and the sages taught that even at death's door, one should not drink from a stolen stream. However, that is the moral standard of ancient saints and sages, which few ancients could achieve, let alone an ordinary mortal like Hu Bayi. It used to be commonly heard that if one smoked in a room for a long time, even rats and flies would get addicted. And this statement is indeed not wrong at all.